Hi Cancer, welcome to your June 2020 Astro Alchemy. It's Rena here. So in June, this is a very powerful month for everybody because there's a lot happening. And it's going to be a change agent month. And because you are a Cancer, this is even more pronounced. I would actually say not only for June, but July, because there's going to be a third eclipse, and that one will be in your opposite sign of Capricorn. And so that will oppose your sun or your ascendant. And that, can also be a time of change. But I'm going to leave that for July. What is going on is that we have a Mercury retrograde, we have a Venus going direct, we've got solar eclipse, lunar eclipse, Neptune going retrograde. So let's see what is what. So the sun is in Gemini until the 20th of the month. So Gemini is your 12th house. This area is activated for you in the month of June. And if you're listening in May, that will also be the case. And, for certain transits, because even in May, Venus is in Gemini as I am recording this, and the sun will be going into Gemini tomorrow as I record this. So you're going to probably already be feeling some of that 12th house activity, which is the month before your debut or your solar return, the new cycle, or if this is your rising sign, the first house for you, your ascendant, that the 12th house is kind of the end of the cycle, but it's also it's also the past in terms of past lives and how they influence us today. And that's, if you think about all the transits that occur, you just have it going over, around and around in a circle. And so you can say the 12th house is the last house, but it's also the womb of creation, because then you are back to square one in that first house and you have a whole new cycle. So sometimes the 12th house can be the prelude for the new cycle. So as I record this, it's right before the new moon in Gemini. So if you're listening then before the 22nd or 23rd of of May, think about some of the things that you want to accomplish in your next year. This is kind of like setting intentions, almost like you would do on your solar return, which is actually the true solar return is going to be the degree of your sun sign. So if you are somebody who is, you have to look at an ephemeris to see the exact date of that, because it may not land on your birthday. And this is because the sun enters Cancer at, each year, sometimes on a different date. So it's the numbers don't match up all the time, but it'll be within a day of your birthday or so. Setting intentions, being clear on what you want, but also from the 12th house perspective, being able to, kind of tune into it at a deeper level, not just kind of the mundane goals that you wish to reach, but also things that can impact you at a spiritual level, because you have the North Node in your 12th house right now in Gemini. And so this is going to be the next 18 months with the eclipses starting to fall into this house and its opposite house, the 6th house of health and work. This is going to be a theme for you for the next 18 months, the practical and the spiritual, and change in both of these areas. So the sun is kind of maybe enlightening you to this new phase in your life, and Venus is here as well. And Venus is retrograde here. So the reason that this is significant is that Venus in the 12th house, well, Venus retrograding in general can be somebody, an old lover coming back into your life. But what happens when an old lover it's transiting that 12th house, the Venus retrograde? I am not saying that this is always going to be an ex. Perhaps you'll meet a new person, but they're actually from another lifetime. Who knows? Even somebody that's an ex that that contacts you or you contact them, one of the things that can be realized is that you have a karmic connection with this person. And by karmic, I'm not saying anything bad or good. I'm saying that, I know that term soul contract or something like that, that perhaps there is something that the two of you are here to help each other with. And maybe even twin flames, any of those types of situations can come into play. And definitely also, what are your values concerning the spiritual? Cancer is a water sign, so you may be naturally intuitive, but you also may be quite concerned about your material well-being. You may feel that you have to make sure that you are well taken care of in that arena. And there can be kind of a battle between wanting this sense of safety or security within the monetary system and wanting to explore the spiritual or the creative even. This can certainly play out for people who consider themselves artistic, because the 6th house is where the South Node is. And this is an area that you're quite familiar with already. You've already learned these lessons. So the 12th house at this part in your journey in life is more of the unknown and must be kind of like given more attention to at this time than the practical. But it doesn't mean that you ignore the practical. That's not what the South Node transit or your South Node in your natal chart is all about. It's just that if you believe in the premise that we come here for the means of, in order to expand, we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. We have to kind of venture outside our comfort zone, trying new things, sometimes risking everything. And risking is not just risking financially, it can be risking embarrassment, risking failure. And it requires a person to be willing to let go of that need for guarantees and things like that. And that kind of, I sense a lot of caution within the sign of Cancer. Protectiveness, the nurturing and the protective quality of Cancer can be self-protective. But sometimes you can protect, just like you can overprotect a child so that they're fearful of doing anything that they're not familiar with. You can overprotect yourself. And then you are playing small in life. So you have to sometimes take a few risks. We would say calculated risks, not be reckless, but calculated risks. And be able to go in a different direction sometimes. And at the very least, this transit of the North Node through your 12th house should be a time when you are more in touch with some spiritual influences, teachers, places of worship that are very, sacred places that can be very inspirational and helpful, and so on and so forth. But Venus here can even be within the romantic area. And In the 12th house, Venus can be a secret love affair. And so with the retrograde, it could be going back to that. The thing that you have to really get clear on, Cancer, is whether or not, if this is true for you or it has the potential of being true, if you really understand what you're getting yourself into. The average Cancer is a person, male or female, who wants a permanent relationship, I would think. And if this is something that you believe will eventually lead there, you have to look at all of the facts of what is going on in that particular case to determine whether that's true. Because as much as you may want it to be true, it may not be, and you could get hurt. So, but you know what? It may not even matter, because there may be something that you have to learn from this overall. And so ultimately, in that case, it would be rather what we would call educational. And it's interesting because Mars is in Pisces until almost the end of the month. It seems like the end of the month is when a lot, I should say the last half of the month is when so much will seem to be happening. Because at the beginning of the month, even Mars in Pisces is more of a... Mars and Pisces are like, fish on a bicycle. Because Pisces is not a sign that is about action. It's about intuition. It's more contemplative than, active. And so it may feel hard to really know what you want and go after and get it, although it's in great aspect to you, Cancer, because it's a water sign. So it really does, it's in your 9th house. And that could even be something that has some kind of travel, long distance attached to it. Even though 9th house is a mental house, it does have that connection to expansion of the geography. So really, I feel like a lot of the action is concentrated in the second half. But, and the reason I'm even talking about this is I'm talking about the 12th house for you and what that represents. And so you're going to have Venus in that 12th house with the sun. Mars is in the 9th house. And the 9th and the 12th houses are both connected to spiritual matters in their own way, so that could still be in play. And but we have the first eclipse of the month on the 5th. This is the first one in Sagittarius for this cycle. It's very interesting this year. We're going to have two pairs of opposite signs that are eclipsing in 2020. This is a year of 7 eclipses. And I believe, how many of them are lunar eclipses? I think only, I don't mean only, I think 5 out of the 7. There was one in January in your sign. There's 2 in, there's like 5. It's amazing. So I feel like 2020 is kind of the end of something, the end of a cycle. It's really interesting. When we get into a new decade, it always seems like it's still the past decade, the remnants of that past decade, if you think about it in the past. Like the 60s didn't begin until probably 1964 or something like that. So we still are dealing with the remnants of the energy, the influences of the past. But this is like kind of that ending year, that reflection year. And look at what we've had so far. I mean, we've got 3 retrograding planets right now, or maybe 4. I think Pluto might be retrograding too, but I usually don't pay too much attention of Pluto, but we've had so much shutdown. And that feeling of just standing still in place, even if you're working, you still probably felt a certain like restriction, like you might as well have had, a personal planet retrograding at that time, Mars retrograding, for instance, or even Saturn retrograding, even though that's not really a personal planet. So anyway, lunar eclipse at 15 degrees of Sag, and this is going to fall in that practical 6th house. So this may be a month, Cancer, where you're really looking at your job, and I would say, lunar eclipses might take something from you, but they're not taking something from you that doesn't need to go. So not to say, not to say to a Cancer person, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. No, that doesn't mean you might get a major promotion. A lunar eclipse is a powerful full moon, which means that something is coming to fruition in a big way, in a big, big way. And eclipses do mean change in general. So is there some kind of a shift? Likely, although I've had eclipses that didn't seem like they did much of anything. So you can't get too caught up in what is going to happen. You would probably know already if there is a chance. And of course, we're going through a lot of adjustments right now in general with all kinds of work spaces because of what has happened. And in the aftermath, when things are starting to open up again, there are going to be shifts for some people. And they may involve not necessarily losing your job, but maybe working from home permanently. For if that is how it plays out for you, you might be jumping for joy, because Cancers are homebodies, so it's not going to be something negative for somebody like you. If you are desperately unhappy with a job and you lose it and you're able to collect unemployment, it gives you that space to be able to do something else and to be able to go in the direction that is more suitable for you. Anything that happens, and this isn't just now, I want to make this clear. This is for the next 18 months. We're going to have solar eclipses there, lunar eclipses there. It all depends. And for some of you, this may actually be in the 5th house. That has to do with, if you're born in the second, half of the second decanate and the third, the last 15 degrees of Cancer, then this will, or 14 degrees, whatever, this will fall in your 5th house, and this will be more of a romantic influence or a creative influence, where that might be when somebody proposes to you, or you propose to somebody else, or you fall in love, maybe at first sight. You never know. Something big happening, something that takes over. And that's a romantic area. So, or even like a pregnancy, especially if it was one that has been hard to, a conception that's been hard. I mean, that it just takes, or maybe it's a little bit too easy for it to happen. Okay. On the 18th, we have Mercury retrograde, 14 degrees of your sign, Cancer. So this will, if you're, again, it's funny that it is almost at that same degree of the lunar eclipse. So if you're born in the second, between 15 and 29 degrees of Cancer, this is falling in your 12th house. And this is going to be more of a looking at some of the things that you have kind of swept under the rug, the thoughts that you've had that might kind of come up at this time. For other people, the first 14 degrees, this will fall in your first house of the self, and it's going to go back to 5 degrees of Cancer. And I'm sorry. I don't know what degree it's going to go back to. I don't have that in front of me. But the point is that this is something to take into consideration regarding your own image, how you carry yourself, how you project yourself, because other people may get certain ideas about you that are not true. The first house is your image. And sometimes if you've noticed a negative reaction or a confused reaction, something that you don't want, let's put it that way, maybe you're being misunderstood, then this is a time to really reflect upon that and possibly change things. And that could be as superficial as the way that you dress. Sometimes, especially when a person is young, and a female tend to dress in a way that maybe provocatively wanting to attract attention to themselves, and then at a certain point not wanting to, or feeling like, I don't like that attention anymore. Or you can have a Cancer person who feels very, it feels like people are a little bit, if people are avoiding you and you don't know why, or, you just can sense that something isn't quite right, and you reflect upon it and you say, well, I do have a tendency to get very sensitive about anything. When somebody asks me a question, if I perceive it in a certain way, and people are afraid to offend me because I get visibly upset, and I need to figure out how I can lessen this quality, especially if your rising sign is Cancer, and this is, your natal chart. You may have this tendency to kind of give that image that you really are fragile. And in some cases, if your sun is also not in Cancer, let's say your sun is in Leo and you have Cancer rising, you may be, why do people think I'm a snowflake? And it's because, you come across as very self-protective, and you feel like it's preventing you from meeting or sustaining a contact, even if it's a platonic friend. You may feel like it's cutting into your ability to, keep friendships or whatever it is, but just kind of like those kinds of issues. On the 21st, there's a solar eclipse at 0 degrees of Cancer. So there you go. There's your new moon. Again, we have to look at the degree since it's 0 degrees, unless you're born on that cusp of Gemini. This is going to be in your 12th house. And so the 12th house is actually more activated. There are 2 new moons in Cancer. That was another significant thing that I forgot to say at the beginning. So there's one in July. talking about July. So you're going to have, I don't know, if you know what the second new moon in a month is called, please let me know. I know it's not called a blue moon, but it's probably called something. But that's pretty cool. So I think that Cancer people can assume that their lives are going to feel a lot of change this year. Maybe you've already sensed that because you've had an eclipse in your sign, and maybe ever since, November of 2018, I guess it would be, when we first had the North Node go into Cancer. Was that when it was? Yeah, because it was a year and a half ago. So perhaps the last 18 months have been jam-packed with different kinds of events. So this one may be more on the spiritual level, and you can look to the new moon next month to be more of your new moon of moving forward and setting your intentions. However, this could be a rebirth experience for you in a certain way, at least spiritual rebirth, being a solar eclipse and a very powerful new moon in this spiritual house. On the 23rd, Neptune goes retrograde in Pisces, and Pisces again is that ninth house. So some kind of spiritual. Now, this might be more with organized religion, is kind of being laid bare to you. When Neptune goes retrograde, some of those illusions are laid bare. And that may mean that you're going in a more spiritual direction. So the illusion is kind of being exposed, and you're becoming more realistic about it. And this could be about like even past influences that you've had with religion. If you were raised in a certain religion, that you've really like retained that dogma and that has impacted you adversely in some way, that can actually be a really good thing. And Venus goes direct on the 25th at 5 degrees of Gemini in that 12th house. And so this has been you reviewing your spirit, what are your spiritual values? It can be for sure. So that's really, I feel like there's a strong emphasis on the spiritual, and it may be that in July is when you really start to feel that it is your time to experience a new cycle, because most of you will have your actual birthdays then, and then you'll have that new moon at a later degree, I think, or you could say a latter degree, like 28 degrees of Cancer. So it will impact most Cancerians in the first house. So I don't know if you can hear that out there. There's a lot of landscaping. I'm going to let you go. But if you would like a natal chart interpretation or looking at the years ahead for you astrologically, please check out my offerings. I have the link below. Thank you for listening, Cancer. Have a great solar return. Bye.